200 years. That's how long humanity has been out here, zipping between the stars. But instead of a warm welcome, we found ourselves on the outside looking in. The established races of the Milky Way, they've blocked us, ignored us. So, we decided to play a different game. While they used their ancient wormhole networks, we found something better. A Prothean power core. This thing doesn't just bend space, it tears it open. We create our own rifts in space-time, jumping across galaxies in seconds, while they're still stuck in transit for hours. Everything came to a head in the Orion sector. A major disaster struck, and we were there first. Our ships arrived in a flash, our medics already on the ground, starting triage and saving lives. By the time the other races showed up, we were already in control. This didn't sit well with them, especially the Drathkar, the oldest and most powerful race in the galaxy. They're angry. They see our speed not as an advantage, but as a threat. For eons, the Drathkar have ruled the galactic pecking order, and nearly every race looks up to them. Every race, that is, except for humanity. This defiance earned us their eternal hatred, and where the Drathkar lead, the others follow. Every time we entered the Grand Council, we were met with scorn, labeled as pathetic lamans, and shoved into the back of the chambers, unseen and unheard. While the other ambassadors haggled for resources and knowledge, we were left to pick at the scraps. But humans are resilient. We started separating ourselves, leaving the Milky Way behind to explore other galaxies. Our ambassador began skipping council meetings altogether. Soon, the lower-level races started to whisper, noticing the empty seats where the humans were supposed to be. They wondered where we had gone and what we were planning. The Drathkar ambassador, Clintic New, overheard other races gossiping. They were talking about how disrespectful the humans were, not showing up, not pledging allegiance to the council. He glanced at their empty seats and felt a surge of indignation. The Drathkar's power and importance needed to be asserted, and these humans were the perfect example to make. At the next meeting, he watched them closely. The human delegation walked in, sat down, and immediately started talking amongst themselves, completely ignoring the crucial haggling happening right in front of them. Clintic New found himself watching them, his own attention drifting from the proceedings. What could possibly be so important that they dare to ignore the entire council? Finally, his patience wore thin. He stood up, the entire assembly falling silent. In front of thousands of species, he fixed his gaze on the human ambassador, Jake McDonald, and his voice boomed across the chamber. "What," he demanded, "is so important?" They had the audacity to ignore this council meeting, and at times not even show up. Do they feel so important that it gives them the right to act like gods and do whatever they want? Jake stood up for the first time. No one even knew what his voice sounded like. He cleared his throat and said point blank, "We find these proceedings boring and non-beneficial to humans as a whole. We get scraps, the leftovers from all the other races." He paused, then continued, "We can mine our own Kuiper Belt and have all the resources we need. If we take any scraps, it's just to get a project or research started." Everyone gasped. Then the Drathkar ambassador stared at Jake and demanded, "How dare you disrespect all of these species and this council? What do you say for yourself?" Jake just shrugged his shoulders. "Well," he said calmly, "it's obvious the council members need these resources more than we humans do. We can do without your council contributions." This put Clintic New on his heels. He screamed at Jake, "How dare you? You are the most disrespectful species I have ever known." Jake just shrugged and asked, "Why?" "Because we won't get on our knees and kiss your feet? Sorry, but I can do without that." Clintic New slammed his fist down, calling for a vote to ban humans from the council, exclude them from all deals, and forbid any other species from doing business with them. The vote was unanimous. All council members voted to ban the humans. As the guards came to escort them out, The humans held their heads high and walked out with pride. This confused the other aliens. The last race voted out had pleaded for readmission, but were refused. A plague later wiped them out. Unable to get medical aid, they were never heard from again. But the humans, they walked out like they had already won. But the humans, they did none of this. They just walked out. As time went on, the other races saw less and less of them. Every once in a while, a cargo hauler captain, just passing through, might speak to a human. But mostly, the humans stayed within their own system. They had a launch system just outside their solar system. And once a ship entered this area, it activated its jump drive and just disappeared. No one knew where they went. The common assumption was they were off trading in another galaxy. The Council, getting nervous, started sending stealth probes to the human system. They needed to know what was happening. Were the humans a threat? But the probes sent back nothing alarming, just normal space operations. Everything looked peaceful. It seemed the humans were prospering. This infuriated the Drathkar. They sent envoys to other galaxies, issuing a veiled threat. Don't do business with the humans, or you'll face the might of the Council's fleet. Everyone told the Drathkar the same thing. The humans stopped doing business first. No one had even seen a human in months. All the emissaries returned to the Drathkar, home council, and reported back the same story. The humans just vanished from the trade routes. Now, the big question was, where did they go? One council member suggested, maybe they're going much further out, trading beyond the council's knowledge and sight. They all pondered this, turning to the massive universe map. Most of the known galaxies had been touched by the Drathkar. For the ones that hadn't, they dispatched an emissary fleet to investigate. Months passed. The fleets returned to Drathkar Prime and reported that no one out there had even heard of humans. This deeply confused and concerned Clintock knew. If they weren't here, and they weren't out there ... where in the universe were the humans going? They were so vibrant, they didn't look like they were suffering at all. In fact, they were thriving. Clintock knew there was only a limited supply of raw materials inside an asteroid belt. Even the Sol system, with its 2 asteroid belts, couldn't sustain a prosperous spacefaring race forever. That's why the Drathkar created the Galaxy Council. They worked and traded closely with other galaxies to make sure they had enough raw materials to satisfy their needs. But was everyone being honest? The military arm of the Drathkar had a suggestion. Attach a stealth probe to the hull of a merchant ship. This would let them track the ships in real time, see where they were really going, and find out if any other species were lying to them. Clintock considered the idea. It was risky, but necessary. He agreed. The Drathkar military had been watching the human merchant ships for weeks, meticulously tracking their movements. They worked tirelessly to map out a schedule, learning exactly when the next vessel would leave the system. Finally, the time came. Their plan was risky, but simple. 2 Drathkar soldiers would venture out on a spacewalk, waiting for a human ship to enter the jump area just outside the Sol system. Their mission: attach a tiny probe to the hull and then get clear before the jump tore them to shreds. They spotted their target, a lone merchant ship, and moved with silent precision. In a flash, they swooped in, attached the probe, and rocketed away. The mission was a success. Now, all they had to do was wait. As the merchant ship made the jump, Clintock and the Council watched the galaxy map with bated breath. The ship's icon blazed a trail, flying past galaxy after galaxy until it finally reappeared. In the great, empty void between them, the Council members started speculating. Maybe the ship was waiting for a rendezvous, a cargo transfer perhaps. They watched the screen intently, trying to decipher its next move. Suddenly, the ship entered another jump. This time, it was a hard left turn, and just like before, it bypassed every galaxy along its path, ignoring everything. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished, gone. Completely off the known universe map. Shockwaves rippled through the council chamber. One member screamed, "Where did it go?" Clintook knew, ever the voice of reason, quieted everyone. "It's likely the probe we attached simply fell off or malfunctioned," he stated calmly. But another member wasn't convinced. Or, he suggested, maybe they jumped to another dimension. There are over 10,000 known dimensions, after all. Clintook knew shut that down immediately. "Impossible," he declared. "You can't bring materials from another dimension into our spacetime. It would create a causality paradox." A silence fell, then another question emerged. Then how did they create such an advanced jump drive? They've only been traveling through space for 400 years, with just 200 of those being intergalactic. We've been out here for eons, and we still don't have a jump drive system that advanced. Clintook knew was stumped. He started to wonder if it was actually true. Were they somehow traveling to another dimension to get their supplies? But all his scientific knowledge screamed no. It would be like negative energy meeting positive energy, tearing a hole in the fabric of space-time. A hole they couldn't seal. It would create a permanent doorway, inviting the other dimension to cross over at will, ultimately ripping both realities apart. But the thought lingered. Before he went too deep down that rabbit hole, he needed to find that probe. He sent out a fleet, but after days of searching, they found nothing. Now, he was almost convinced. He had to bring this to the Milky Way Council. The humans are violating our highest law. This systematic extermination of the whole race. Clintook called for an emergency session, which was granted. Within 1 week, he was standing before the entire Galactic Council. He began his address simply, "The humans are violating our highest law." A heavy silence fell. "I don't know how long they've been violating it," he continued, his voice echoing. "But they are moving between dimensions and gathering raw materials this way." One council member rose, demanding, "What evidence do you have for this outrageous claim?" Clintook knew this was coming. He took a deep breath. "We have been watching the humans with stealth probes." Gasps rippled through the chamber. "We attached one to a merchant ship. It disappeared at the edge of the known universe." The room erupted in shouts. Clintook nodded grimly. "Yes," he spoke over the noise. "That's right. They have been violating our highest law all along. I want to push for a vote for the complete deletion of the human race. It's just so." Just then, an aide rushed to Clintook New. As he bent down, the aide whispered that the probe had started rebroadcasting. Clintook New stumbled in shock and demanded he double-check. The aide confirmed they had triple-checked it. The probe was broadcasting again. A council member calmed the room and asked Clintook New if he had new information. He cleared his throat and said, "UHM, yes. It seems the probe is rebroadcasting. The merchant ship has returned to normal space." The council member then looked at Clintook New and said, "Then we must have the human delegation return to the Great Council chambers to answer these charges." The council voted and agreed. Before they exterminated an entire race, they needed to hear from them directly. Several weeks later, the ambassador and his staff entered the Great Hall. Jake was called to the podium, where the council declared that the human race stood accused of violating the greatest law. Jake just stood there, a smirk playing on his lips. "What was all that?" he asked. Clintook New stepped forward, his voice grave. "We are entering different dimensions to gather raw materials for the human race." Jake's brow furrowed in confusion. "And what's your proof of that?" The council didn't hesitate. They pulled up stealth probe data, displaying it for Jake to see. He scanned the information, and his amusement turned to a sharp glare. "You've been spying on us? What a dishonorable way to get information." The council erupted in outrage. "Where have the humans been going?" one demanded. Jake's smirk returned. "Well," he began, "we discovered a massive asteroid belt, light years beyond the edge of the universe." "Lies!" Another council member shouted. There's nothing beyond the edge of space. Jake just smiled. Oh, but there is. He activated a holoimager, revealing a map showing a vast asteroid belt and several space stations and refineries just outside it. Everyone was just stunned, completely speechless. Even Clintock knew had no explanation, no answer to give. Jake looked directly at the council and asked if there were any more accusations against humanity. Then he spoke, his voice ringing with conviction. I know why the Drathkar are doing this. They feel threatened by us. But the rest of you? He scanned their faces. As a civilization, humans have never caused you problems. We've come to your aid without asking for anything in return. The Drathkar want genocide, and you're all just following along because you're spineless. With that, Jake stepped off the podium and began walking down the aisle toward the great hall doors. His staff quickly fell in behind him, leaving the entire council frozen in shock. After the human delegation had left, one council member finally broke the silence, calling for a vote to end the session. Another quickly seconded it. The motion passed, concluding the session without ordering the destruction of human civilization. This was a huge blow to the Drathkar, and especially to Clintock New. He had to return to Drathkar Prime and face his council, admitting he'd failed to convince the Great Council to end the human threat. In some cases, failure like this meant death. He wouldn't know his fate until he stood before them. After hours of tense debate, the council made a surprising decision. Clintock New was spared, and the humans would be left alone. Clintock New was demoted to general and reassigned to a battle fleet far from home, patrolling a quiet, unassuming star system. Meanwhile, humanity thrived, helping other species with plagues and border disputes. Peace reigned. But then, a fleet of unknown aliens appeared on the opposite side of the galaxy, right near the Drathkar homeworlds. All Drathkar fleets, including Clintock New's, were recalled. An invasion had begun, and they were the only defense. Clintock New had requested a recall so many times, but every single plea was denied. He could hear it all, the raw desperation crackling over the comms. Fleets pleading for reinforcements, voices calling for help, then the screams as ships and entire fleets were decimated. And Clintock New? He could only stand there on his bridge, disgraced and heartbroken. Drathkar captains and admirals he knew personally, friends, were dying, and all he could do was pace back and forth, listening to their final moments. Meanwhile, the Great Council convened in an emergency session. This new alien threat, this scourge attacking Drathkar Prime, would eventually come for them all. In a move never before attempted, they voted to create a joint armada. A unanimous decision to build the largest fleet the galaxy had ever witnessed. 50,000 warships from every race in the Milky Way. Every race but one. Earth. Clintock New reviewed the reports. The humans weren't joining. They weren't even preparing for war. He slammed his datapad to the floor. He mumbled, "That seals it. The humans are behind the attack. That's the only thing that makes sense. They figured out how to create this plague and release it on us. That's why they never begged or pleaded their case when they were kicked out of the Great Council." He ordered Starcoms to open a channel to Jake the human. Finally, a channel opened to Jupiter Station. Jake accepted the call and said, "Greetings. I'm glad to see you were spared." Clintock New shouted, "Stop with the pleasantries. I know what you humans did." Jake looked confused. "What we did? I don't understand." Clintock New yelled, "I know you released this plague. That's why you aren't helping with this war." Jake sat up. "My friend, those are serious accusations." Clintock New interrupted, "If you don't stop this now, I will personally hunt down every human." Jake replied firmly, "That is a serious threat. Like I told you before, we had nothing to do with this. Just because you don't see us preparing for war doesn't mean we aren't. But if you want us to help, all you have to do is ask." Clintock New took a deep breath, his voice strained. So, you're not involved with this other race? Jake's reply was firm. No, absolutely not. Hope flickered in Clintognew's eyes. Then can the humans help us? We've heard too many friends die. Our fleet's cut down. Jake paused, the weight of the request hanging in the silence. Okay, he said finally. Let me talk to the president. Clintognew offered his thanks, a first for him with another species, before the communication cut. He sat lost in thought on his flagship's bridge, the last of the Drathkar fleet. An ensign's voice broke the silence. Sir, will they help? Clintognew looked at his crew, his expression grim. I hope so. His datapad lit up with new orders. Defend the homeworlds. A final stand. What greater glory than to die protecting home? Then he yelled to Drathkar Prime. We will be dining in the great halls tonight with the rest of our fallen brethren. The fleet prepped and jumped to slipspace. It took several days for them to arrive, only to find they were the last line of defense between an alien race and the fall of Drathkar. All Clintognew could think about were his people and whether the humans, those so-called honorable allies, would arrive in time to help. Just then, 50,000 warships of the Council's Grand Armada warped in. Clintognew cheered, thinking, maybe we don't need the humans after all. He walked to the holotable, gazing at the magnificent fleet. What a grand sight, he said, turning to his crew. Let's make war. Everyone cheered and went to work. Clintognew began orchestrating the battle, directing ships to press the attack while others attempted a flanking maneuver. But the enemy anticipated the move and countered it swiftly. Clintognew realized this battle was not going well at all. Phantom static, where the phantoms speak through the static.